There was a point in which Christian game developer Scott Cawthon had hit rock bottom. His games weren't selling. He was working at the Dollar General just to make ends meet while still making games in his spare time. When one of his games was criticized for its unintentionally creepy characters, he was ready to hang it all up. He had a moment of crisis and debated whether or not he wanted a future as a video game developer. But clarity came to him, and he decided to give it one more shot, deciding that if they considered his characters creepy, he was going to seriously give them creepy. This premise set the stage for one of the most iconic horror games of the last decade. In 2014, Scott Cawthon released Five Nights at Freddy's, a game that has quickly become a cultural phenomenon. Today we're going to dive into the eerie world of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and explore how a simple game managed to spawn a multimedia franchise, including sequels, books, and even a movie. So grab your flashlight and keep an eye on those cameras as we take today's haunting trip down memory card lane. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I hope these words find you well. Hello and welcome to the 206th episode of our video game history podcast, A Trip Down Memory Card Lane. Each week, we'll tell you a story relevant to the current week in gaming history. It can be about a game or the people that have created it. It can be about a console or the technology that brought it to life. We often talk about the companies that bring it all together, making our hobby, video games, a reality. While telling you each story, we hope to teach you something new about the topic, what it took from the world as its inspiration, or what it gave back to the world in its legacy. Today, we're going to explore the creation and impact of Five Nights at Freddy's, which first released on August 8th, 2014. I'm David Casson, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, who definitely does not, wink wink, stay up all night monitoring security cameras. He's my brother, Rob Casson. Rob, have you ever actually had a job that kept you up all night?
Oh, absolutely. I used to work overnights in college.
Interesting.
Yep.
I think I remember that.
Yeah, well, I worked in the freezer.
You worked in the freezer overnight.
Yep. It was pretty cold.
Oh, yeah. I'll give you that one. You get that one. That's a freebie.
Damn straight it is.
So, today we're doing Five Nights at Freddy's. You a fan?
I've never actually played it.
I'm surprised. I I I'm surprised.
I don't play as many horror games as you think.
I still though that was a whole thing. I don't know. Have you watched it at least?
I've seen gameplay of it, yeah.
All
Not
right.
a whole lot, but I have seen enough to know what it's about and some of the characters in it. But yeah, I just never really played it myself.
Huh. For whatever reason, I thought you were a fan. You look like a Five Nights at Freddy fan.
What's that supposed to mean?
You look like a Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria fan.
I mean, I like the pizzeria portion, but I don't know about the rest.
You don't know about the rest. All right. Well, before I get into spinning its tail, why don't you share with everyone some other things that have happened during this week in gaming history?
Certainly, Dave. Kicking it off on August 6th, 1986, Nintendo released Metroid for the Famicom Disk System in Japan. Developed by Nintendo R&D 1 and produced by Gunpei Yokoi, Metroid introduced players to the intergalactic bounty hunter Samus Aran and her mission to thwart the space pirates' plans involving the parasitic Metroid creature on the planet Zebes. The game was groundbreaking for its non-linear exploration, atmospheric world, and the blending of action and platforming elements with a strong emphasis on discovery and backtracking using newly acquired abilities. Metroid was also notable for its surprise ending, revealing that the protagonist was a woman, a significant moment in video game history. The game's innovative design and immersive experience laid the foundation for the Metroidvania genre, influencing countless games that followed. And we talked about it back in episode 51, so if you want to learn more, go check it out.
Yes, we learned all about the pizza shop that they ordered from across the street.
That's just a small piece of information that Dave remembers that I don't, but apparently you'll learn about it. Go check it out, 51.
Mm-hmm.
On August 7th, 1987, Nintendo released Rad Racer for the Nintendo Entertainment System in Japan, known there as Highway Star. Developed by Square, now Square Enix, and designed by Hironobu Sakaguchi, the game is a classic arcade-style racing game that puts players behind the wheel of a high-speed sports car, racing through various scenic courses to reach the finish line before time runs out. Rad Racer was notable for its impressive graphics and sense of speed for its time, as well as its use of stereoscopic 3D, which could be experienced with the use of 3D glasses included with the game. The game's challenging gameplay, smooth controls, and energetic soundtrack made it a popular title on the NES, contributing to the early success of Square as a developer before they became famous for their role-playing games.
That is very true. We talked about Rad Racer, I believe, in our episode on Final Fantasy when we learned about the career of Sakaguchi. So if you want to learn a little bit about what they were doing in that time period and the contributions that he made, with Rad Racer and otherwise, take a look at that. Take a look at that episode, which was a while ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And keeping up with Square, on August 6, 93, Square released Secrets of Mana for the SNES in Japan. This action role-playing game, known as Seiken Densetsu 2 in Japan, is celebrated for its real-time battle system, lush graphics, and cooperative multiplayer gameplay, allowing up to 3 players to join forces. Directed by Koichi Ishii and produced by Hiromichi Tanaka, Secrets of Mana follows the story of a young hero who, along with his companions, embarks on a quest to save the world from an evil empire by restoring the power of the mystical Mana Sword. The game is renowned for its vibrant world, memorable characters, and the enchanting musical score composed by Hiroki Kikuta. Secret of Mana received critical acclaim for its innovative gameplay and engaging story, becoming a beloved classic and a significant title in the action RPG genre.
If I'm not mistaken, I have it on next year's calendar, which I don't have in front of me right now, but I know that somewhere I plugged in an episode of Secret of Mana, and I don't believe it's 2024.
Yeah, definitely wouldn't think that it was, considering that would be today's episode.
Oh, good point. Duh.
Crazy.
I know. Way to get one over on me. Congratulations. Aha.
Next up, on August 6, 1995, BS Zelda no Densetsu was released for the Super Famicom Satellaview, a satellite modem peripheral exclusive to Japan. This game is a remake of the original The Legend of Zelda with enhanced 16-bit graphics and a unique broadcasting format. BS Zelda no Densetsu, which stands for Broadcast Satellite Zelda, featured live audio narration and real-time events that occurred during specified broadcast times. Players controlled a boy or girl character, referred to as the Hero of Light instead of Link. The game was broadcast in episodic installments, requiring players to play during designated times to experience the full adventure. BS Zelda no Densetsu is notable for its innovative use of the Satellaview technology and remains a fascinating part of the Legend of Zelda series' history, though it was never officially released outside of Japan. And we learned a little about it back in episode 87, which was all about the Satellaview, so if you want to learn a little more, go check it out and learn about that awesome-ish console
Awesome.
peripheral.
Awesome. It's an interesting story. The Satellaview was a very unique peripheral for the Super Famicom. So had a lot of weird games on it. One of the unique things about that was the live audio narration, right? It was pretty cool because it was a rare time where people were playing it at a specific time, and it was almost like a mix between a video game and a radio show, right? So there were people basically online experiencing the same thing, kind of like how we do nowadays with like Fortnite concerts. This is probably the modern equivalent of something like that, which is really novel to think we were doing something similar in 1995.
Yeah, I just think it's kind of weird. It's cool, but it's also weird that everyone has to play at the same time. Because, like, yeah, you could say you know that other people are playing the same moment at the same time, but like, also you got to be specifically on and like, oh, you have baseball practice at that same time that that episode is coming out on the Satellaview. Well, now what? You're SOL.
Yeah,
You're gonna miss out. So
yeah,
it's
for sure.
cool, but it's also limiting. On August 9th, 1996, Harvest Moon was released for the SNES in Japan. Developed by Amicus and published by Pack-In Video, this farming simulation game introduced players to the peaceful, rewarding life of managing a farm. Players take on the role of a young farmer tasked with restoring and maintaining a neglected farm, which involves growing crops, raising livestock, and building relationships with townsfolk. Harvest Moon stood out for its non combat, life simulation gameplay, focusing on time management and resource allocation. The game was praised for its charming graphics, engaging mechanics, and the unique sense of accomplishment it provided. Harvest Moon laid the foundation for a beloved franchise that has seen numerous sequels and spin offs, influencing the development of other life simulation games in the process. And we looked at its history back in episode 41, so if you want to learn more, go check it out.
Nice.
Yeah. And last up for this week in gaming history, on August 8th, 2013, Cookie Clicker was developed by French developer Julien Ortail Thienot. This incremental game quickly gained popularity for its simple yet addictive gameplay. Players start by clicking on a giant cookie to produce more cookies, which can then be spent on upgrades and automated cookie generating structures, such as grandmas, farms, and factories. The game created a the game features a humorous and whimsical tone with various upgrades, achievements, and events that keep players engaged over long periods. Cookie Clicker became a cornerstone of the incremental game genre, inspiring numerous other games with its straightforward mechanics and engaging progression system. Its success highlighted the appeal of idle games and the creative potential within the genre. Just got to be careful because them grandmas go crazy.
For cookies,
If you know, you know, Dave.
I did you ever play Cookie Clicker?
Oh my goodness, have I played Cookie Clicker?
Okay, all right.
That's why I'm saying if you know, you know. But them grandmas, they go crazy.
Well, you know that idle games are like still one of my favorite genres to this day. So yeah, Cookie Clicker was a thing for me too.
So, but that's it for this week in gaming history. So I think with that, it's time to learn about today's topic.
Scott Cawthon attended the Art Institute of Houston in 1996, learning all about computer graphics. But the truth is, he had already been teaching himself how to make video games, rather, using what is now the ClickTeam Fusion engine for a few years prior. His first game, titled Doofus, was a side shooter where you played as Doofus the dinosaur fighting against the forces of evil. He made it using the ClickTeam engine, which was called, I think, Click and Play at the time, in 1994. After finishing up school, Cawthon picked up game development again in 2002, getting heavily into it throughout 2002, 2003, a year in which, specifically 2003, he made 16 different games. Now, most of them are lost to time. We know about it through bits and pieces of interviews and things like that. But most of them aren't playable. There's games in there like Lost Island, Mage Knight, Gunball, Ships of Chaos, and no less than 3 games in what's called the Legacy of Flan series.
All right.
The Legacy of Flan was an RPG centered around little slime characters, and you could play as different flavors of flan to stop someone from giving flans a bad name everywhere. The Legacy of Flan series were also among the first games that Cawthon actually released for others to play, so those are out there in the world. And he continued to make small games that he would release online for the next 8 or 9 years. During this period, there are gems that he brought us, like Junkyard Apocalypse, The Misadventures of Siegfried the Dark Elf on a Tuesday Night. That's a mouthful. Light from Above, Weird Colony. Oh, and he found the time to make Legacy of Flan 4. So if you're a fan of flans, there you go.
Fan of flan, flan of fan, fan of fan.
Fan of Flan. Legacy of Flan 4, Flan Rising. In 2008, he released Moon, which is considered by some to be his first professional, fully realized video game. So Moon is an RPG adventure where you explore a fantasy world and you recruit characters to fight a mechanical menace. It has a customizable party system. There are many items to collect. There are 3 mini games within the game itself. It is a game, and he released it.
It is a game indeed.
It is a game indeed, yes, Moon. It's funny because if you look at his general, if you look at his wiki, his bio in different places, and in general, it'll say Moon was his first game. But if you look at his gaming catalog, even on Wikipedia, it lists all these other games from 2004 to 2008, like a ton of them. Because he was sitting there at home. Click Team is I've used Click Team before. It's a what you see is what you get, like video game editor, right? It's just click and point and so on, drag and drop and all that stuff. So he's sitting there playing with game mechanics, making little games, like single screen, a lot of single screen kind of stuff. Nothing, no big fully realized projects, but they're still games. He was doing what a lot of people don't do. When you get started in that's what they tell people: finish, follow through. And that's what he was doing. He was making these games. They're probably akin to the little flash games you see online, would be probably the easiest reference that I could make to them. Throughout this time period, Cawthon was a member of a Christian group of artists known as Hope Animation. Cawthon is a devout Christian, and as part of this group, he used his graphical skills to help make Christian animated films. These include Noah's Ark, Story of the Biblical Flood, The Pilgrim's Progress, A Christmas Journey About the Blessings God Gives, Bible Plays David and Goliath, and Bible Plays Noah's Ark. So he's making, cartoons around his beliefs as a Christian as part of the Hope Animation Group. As part of this group, he also wrote and produced a series of shorts called the Jesus' Kids Club. I don't know why that's such a mouthful.
Because it is.
Yeah, Jesus' Kids Club. His Christianity would also show in some of his more well-known video game projects from this period of time. He had made, as part of Hope Animation, a movie, film called The Pilgrim's Progress, and in turn, he also made a video game called Pilgrim's Progress. Now, Pilgrim's Progress as a game is a cross between a platformer and a role-playing game. The movie and the game were both based on the novel Pilgrim's Progress, which is, if you don't know, is a novel that was published in 1678, quite a long time ago. It's about a pilgrim named Christian who is on a journey to get cleansed of his sins and enter the celestial city. Now, Cawthon lists some features of the game when you go and look at advertisements, because this one was definitely released online. They include a rich quest system that lets you help people throughout the game, encouraging players to not just reach the end, but make a difference. It includes familiar enemies, such as Beelzebub, Apollyon, and the Great Despair. And it also includes a battle system that focuses on spiritual warfare with emphasis on the importance of prayer and God's blessings. Now, during this period, he was also working on games that weren't necessarily Christian, but had Christian overtones. There was one that he's pretty well known for called The Desolate Hope. Now, The Desolate Hope is described as a mix of three genres. It's a side scroller, it's an overhead adventure, and it's a turn based RPG. Set in a dark, brooding, and twisted industrial landscape, this dystopian story follows a robotic coffee pot who must rescue a fetus being used as a scientific specimen. Now, he's taken some backlash, down the line for this being a very pro-life, anti-abortion message. But Cawthon has gone on record in interviews to say that wasn't his intention when he made it, but that it's not, it's easy to see his values in the stuff he makes, right? So, games that exist wrote, The Desolate Hope constantly plays with the very idea of playing a video game. Unlike many modern games, it's hyper aware of its gamerness. There are games inside of games, simulations inside of simulations, mini games inside of boss fights. And the fact that you're playing as an AI that developed from a computer game is a very hard wink on the exhaustive level of metagaming that's going on. Now, I brought that review. We don't do a lot of reviews anymore, but I brought that review in it to make a point because momentarily we're going to go into Five Nights at Freddy's, and arguably Five Nights at Freddy's is very popular for very much the same kind of stuff, right? Games inside of games, simulations inside of simulations, mini games inside of boss fights, that kind of stuff. Scott Cawthon, even before he was making Five Nights at Freddy's, was creating these immersive worlds that people could pick up on. And he never really stopped. I mean, he's still doing it to this day, to be fair. But I think that review in itself really highlights that he was doing it before the world even really knew him, because we didn't really know him when he was making this game. His projects up until this point, while they were generally well received, but they weren't commercially successful. So Scawthon, I like that's his new name, Scawthon. So Cawthon really struggled to support his family, his wife and two children. Because of this, he changed. He started to make cheap computer games. He started to make free to play mobile titles that he thought would bring in more income. The kind that maybe would bring in, I saw an interview where he said he was bringing in, 20, 30, 40 bucks a month on one of these games. Not moneymakers by any stretch of the imagination. And there are games with titles like Vegas Fantasy Jackpot, Mafia Slot Machine, Bad Waiter Tip Collector, Rage Quit, 20 Useless Apps, Fart Hotel,
Nice.
Cubby Hurdles, Kitty in the Crowd, Dark Prisms, and Sit and Survive.
Some awesome names there.
Well, I mean, Vegas Fantasy Jackpot, Mafia Slot Machine, 20 Useless Apps, like those are definitely the free to play titles that just spam you with ads so whoever made it can collect a little bit of ad revenue.
I mean, yeah, you got to make money.
Well, he wasn't making money because to make ends meet, he had to take on freelance programming jobs, and then he also had to work in retail. He worked at this time for Target. He worked at this time for Dollar General. He was doing whatever it took to support his family, as we all should.
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do.
During this period, 2013 to be exact, he submitted a game to Steam Greenlight called Chipper and Sons Lumber Company. It's described as a resource management title that featured anthropomorphic animals. However, early reviewers ridiculed the game because they thought that the characters, the anthropomorphic animals, were intentionally creepy and resembled scary animatronics. The pressure of his financial situation, coupled with this criticism over Chipper and Sons, sent Cawthon into a super deep depression. But there, he found the inspiration for, I guess, his next chapter in life, leaning into the criticism even harder to come up with something completely new. And speaking of completely new, Rob, have you ever wanted to start your own podcast?
Why the hell would I do that, Dave? I'm already part of this one.
Well, if you don't, let's say that maybe one of our listeners has a unique idea or story to share with the world, but they don't know where to begin. Well, our friends at Zencaster have got them covered. Zencaster's all in one podcasting suite of tools makes it easier than ever to create high quality podcasts.
With Zencaster, you can record up to 4K videos with your guests from your web browser. Plus, with multi-layered backups, you always have the highest quality recordings, even with an unstable connection.
And their post production process, I gotta tell you, it's top notch. Super easy, super simple, so streamlined. It automatically removes all those filler words, the ums, the ahs. I promise you haven't heard them because it gets rid of them. It sets the right podcast loudness. It'll separate the tracks for you, get rid of awkward pauses. It does all of this. It's a few selections of a menu and a single click of a button.
If the thought of podcasting seems overwhelming, relax. Zencaster's all-in-one platform lets you create, produce, and distribute your podcast all in one place.
So if you'd like to get started today, try something new, sign up for Zencaster at zencaster.com/pricing and use our offer code, all one word, memory card lane, and you can get 30% off the first month of any Zencaster paid plan. Go out there and share your ideas with the world. So, up until this point, Rob, Cawthon considered himself, even though there was a mix, he considered himself to be a Christian video game designer. That was how he presented himself to others. He self published Christian video games. That was his focus. Those were the projects that he was proud of. In a 2014 interview with Geeks Under Grace, just after Five Nights at Freddy's came out, Cawthon said, "My relationship with God through the years has been absolutely essential, and only now can I look back and see what He has done. For about 12 years, I dedicated my free time to creating Christian movies and later Christian video games. It didn't go well, but I had faith that God wanted me to create those things anyways. Despite good reviews, my Christian projects were all financial failures. I came to a point where I was very disillusioned and frustrated with God. Actually, it was more like a broken heart. I felt like I squandered so many years of my life, years that could have been spent going back to college, but were instead spent working on Christian projects that went nowhere. I came to the conclusion that I could not have failed so miserably unless God Himself had been holding me down. Either God didn't exist or God hated me. I didn't know which was worse. I decided to change careers, at times pursuing web design, then computer programming, even truck driving, but I always felt drawn back to games. A pivotal moment came for me when my life insurance policy was canceled. The
Oh,
insurance company had caught wind that I'd mentioned suicidal thoughts to my doctor. It was at that point I realized that not only did my life have no value, but now even my death had no value. I went before God again, and it was the first time that I truly went before Him with nothing. I had nothing to offer Him. I told Him to use me somehow. Although at that moment I had no idea what He possibly could use me for, I felt drawn back again to games, but not Christian games anymore. It's not that I wanted to leave the Christian market, I just didn't feel led to make another Christian game. Instead, the events of my life led me to create a great idea for a horror game. In the interview, he later said at some point, something inside me snapped, and I thought to myself, I bet I could make something a lot scarier than that. And of course, that was Chipper, Sons and Lumber, and the anthropomorphic creatures that were being criticized. So basically, he spent a dozen years seeing himself as a Christian video game designer, never had any success, fell into a deep depression, lost his faith temporarily because of it, right?
Right.
And then hit rock bottom when he felt that his life had no value and his death had no value, so he had no value. He hit rock bottom and he said, "You know what? Fuck it. I'm going to lean into this," right? I mean, that's what he did.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess at that point he felt, what else could he do?
Well, what he could do was he could make the best horror game. You want to see scary? I'm going to show you scary. That's what he said.
And did he show us scary?
Well, that is the mentality that inspired him to make Five Nights at Freddy's over the course of the next 6 months. He used his familiar engine, ClickTeam Fusion, to code the game. He created his 3D models in Autodesk. He threw in a mix of audio, some sounds he made, some he bought offline. He had his sons and friends come over and beta test the game, and he worked on it. 6 months, a year went by, and then finally on August 8th, 2014, 10 years ago this week, he was able to release the first Five Nights at Freddy's game to the world. So, yes, that is definitely what he did, right?
Yeah, he did it.
Was it successful?
I had to have been somewhat successful if we're talking about it, huh?
10 years later.
Well, I mean, yeah.
Okay, so you didn't play it, but did you have people in your life that played it?
I can't say that any of my friends played it. I don't know. It's not something that we talked about.
That's so
The
weird.
extent of what I knew was all of the big streamers at the time, like PewDiePie and Markiplier and those folks.
Right. Well, that's great. Thank you for that. That's a phenomenal segue. Five Nights at Freddy was successful. It was initially successful. It was commercially successful, but the reality of the situation is it grew and saw success to the extent that nobody could have guessed in the beginning. And it has a lot to do with perfect timing. Absolutely perfect timing. Five Nights at Freddy's was released just as YouTube. I mean, YouTube was what? I think it was hitting its decade mark because I think 2003 was YouTube, so a decade. But more importantly, YouTube as a platform is really just starting to see Let's Play videos. Now, if you don't know what Let's Play videos are, they are videos in which gamers share their screens and comment on the game as they play it. And at the time, they were still a new, novel concept, but they were about to skyrocket in popularity. Uh, Let's Play created a lot of the early YouTube celebrities, honestly, at least in my opinion, it did. Rob mentioned PewDiePie and Markiplier. They are two of the streamers who got famous doing Let's Play. Those are some household names now, and that's where they got started. Markiplier's first video on Five Nights at Freddy's, a video in which he declared Five Nights at Freddy's the scariest game in years. It currently has over 100 million views. And really, what most people like about Five Nights at Freddy's is it's it's got a very minimalist design to the game, right? On face values, Five Nights at Freddy's, for those of you who don't know, is really just a game where if you wait too long somewhere, something jumps out at you and kills you. But on the other hand, if you play the game, if you take the time to explore the things hanging on the wall and the things that are said and the things that are seen, like the internet did, they began to pick up on the why of the game, little notes and clues that were hidden throughout the game. And that's really where Five Nights at Freddy's game steam. In particular, that was picked up by the YouTube channel The Game Theorist, which was hosted by Matthew Patrick, also known as Matt Pat. Matt Pat started to make videos around these little pieces that were hidden throughout this game and subsequent games. There are a lot of Five Nights at Freddy games. We'll talk about that in a moment. And his YouTube channel, the Game Theorist channel, became a treasure trove for fans of this gaming franchise. In fact, now the Game Theory channel has an actual Five Nights at Freddy's playlist. It has over 60, that's 60. They've made over 60 videos about Five Nights at Freddy's. And collectively, that playlist has racked up over 800 million views. And it was in this way, between the Let's Play gamers and the game theorists, that Five Nights at Freddy's became way more popular than anyone can imagine. You know, as the internet came together to speculate on why these animatronics and the pizzeria were haunted, as they came together to piece together the lore of the world, um, people loved Five Nights at Freddy's and they wanted more Five Nights at Freddy's. So Cawthon began to make more. You know, there was Five Nights at Freddy's 2, 3, 4. In fact, there are 10 games in the main series: Sister
Damn.
Location and Pizzeria Simulator, Help Wanted, Security Breach. There's a whole lot of them. There is spin-offs like the role-playing game Five Nights at Freddy's World. There's an augmented reality game called Five Nights at Freddy's Special Delivery. By my count, by my count, between the main series, the spin-offs, there are some oddities. He made what are called now by fans as troll versions of games, where he put out like fake versions of new games just to mess with people. But they messed with people on one hand and they added to the lore in another. It was clever. By my count, between all the other random Five Nights at Freddy's and everything, Rob, there are, how many do you think there are?
Well, you've already said a lot more than I would have imagined.
Oh, well, then
Uh,
it's way more than you were going to imagine. So,
70.
no, not quite. There are over
Damn.
40 games. There's about
Oh,
40, 40,
damn.
40, 41 or 42.
That's still a ton. Holy crap.
In fact, on the publication date of this podcast, which will be August 8th, 2024, there is a new addition to the Five Nights at Freddy's universe being released called Five Nights at Freddy's Into the Pit, which is a video game adaptation of a short story written within a universe. And there are numerous announced titles that do not have, you know, actual release dates, like to be released in 2025 type deal. So we're 10 years into this gaming franchise, and there are clearly plans for it to not stop anytime soon.
That's insane. I had no idea.
I mean, and they're not all you know, the standard Five Nights at Freddy's. Like, some of them have different stuff. Like, there's one called Pizzeria Simulator, which has business style gameplay built into it, where like you have to spend in game money to buy features for the pizzeria. There's the one called Ultimate Customizable Night, which lets you like put all the pieces from 1, 2, 3, and 4 together and all the characters, and you can choose how, you know, what characters you want active during what night and how active the characters would be. So there's a lot of variety. Um, Help Wanted has all of them and kind of turns it into a virtual reality experience for the player. So I mean, there's a lot of games here. So, and like I said, there was the role playing game, which is Five Nights at Freddy World. There was Freddy in Space. There's Security Breach Fury's Rage, which is a side scrolling beat 'em up set in the universe. There is those Freddy in Space or side scrolling platformers. There's Five Laps at Freddy, which is a kart racing game. So there are lots and lots of variety within the Five Nights at Freddy universe. It grew into something much bigger, much bigger than just the original Five Nights at Freddy game. You know,
Yeah,
which
definitely.
bet you didn't know there was a Five Nights at Freddy kart racer.
I had no idea.
And then there are also novels that Cawthon has written. They're short story analogies. And as of this recording, because it came out, I think, early end of July, there is the first in a series of interactive novels, which are basically like choose your own adventure books that were released in celebration of its 10th anniversary. So they're in the process of celebrating 10 years as well. Some of these novels have also been turned into graphic novels. There are tabletop games, 5 different tabletop games set in the universe. There are Five Nights at Freddy versions of Clue and Monopoly. So you know you've hit the big time when there is a Five Nights at Freddy's Monopoly. And of course, a year ago, less than a year ago, because it was last summer, well, maybe end of last summer, we got a major theatrical release with a Five Nights at Freddy's movie, an actual theatrical movie, which was written and produced in part by Cawthon himself. Did you see the movie yet?
Had no idea.
It's good. I enjoyed the movie. I enjoyed the movie. I have played at least one game in the series. It did not grab me. I'm not one of the ones who got hooked by Five Nights at Freddy's. I understand it. I don't know. I guess I just don't have the patience for the lore, which is where a lot of people dig into things. But I mean it's a jump scare game for what it's worth. It's fun. But anyways, watch the movie. Movie was good. I enjoyed the movie. Every interview about it that I've read that talk about Cawthon's involvement basically talks up how involved he is in the franchise, that he was very much in control of his creative vision and having it stick to his vision of what he saw 10 years ago when he started the series. The movie was a success, no doubt. It is the highest grossing film for Blumhouse Productions, which is the production company that took on the project and saw it through to completion. The movie grossed over $297 million at the box office. So people went to go see
Jesus.
it.
Yeah, clearly.
And let's think too, that movie came out last year, which was 9 years into the franchise. Also proof that there is still a lot of interest into the Freddy Fazbear series. So people are still clamoring for more Five Nights at Freddy's, no doubt. No doubt. And Cawthon obviously still has his hand on it. At one point, he announced his intention to step away and retire from game development in 2021. It appears he hasn't, because he's still making games and writing books in the series. And that's an interesting story in itself, to be fair. In June of 2021, he became a trending topic on Twitter when his political donations were made public. And surprise, surprise, a man who considers himself a Christian his whole life donates almost exclusively to Republican politicians, right? I mean, I don't know why anyone is surprised at this. Maybe people who didn't know he was a Christian game designer. That's all I can come up with.
Yeah, that's true.
And of course, liberal leaning social media doesn't like it when you donate to Republicans like Trump, for instance. So they lashed out at him, which is not surprising, because that's what the stupid internet people do. Is whenever someone doesn't agree with them, they very loudly let them know they don't agree with them, right?
Yeah.
And to Cawthon's credit, he stood up for his values. He posted on Reddit online that he supports the Republican Party, specifically calls himself pro-life. So no doubt that's that party. And in the backlash of it all, he came out and said that he was retiring and stepping away. But as we know now, the reality of the situation is he really didn't ever step away. We actually saw him recently, kind of recently, no doubt. So the game theorist Matthew Patrick, Matt Pat, he retired earlier this year from YouTube after 10 or 12 years of doing it. And his last video, called The Final Theory, actually has Cawthon in it. And as a fun trivia note, that video was Cawthon's absolute first public video appearance. He is a very secretive man. He does not like to be in the spotlight in any way, shape, or form. And frankly, he doesn't. He just hasn't. But since I guess I agree with this. Since so much of his success was really wrapped up into the lore that the game theorists were pulling out of his games, I mean, no doubt when they retired, he had to see it through, you know?
Yeah, true.
Did you ever get into the game theory channel?
Nah, I may have seen a video or two, but not. I can't really think that I was like any offhand, so I probably have to say no.
No, but you did watch people do let's plays of Five Nights at Freddy. So, um,
I wouldn't say I watched them, but I've seen clips of it. I didn't sit and watch them play. You know, just fun clips here and there.
so we're just a pair of non Five Nights at Freddy's fan talking about Five Nights at Freddy's.
Well, I mean that's the case for a lot of the games that we talk
Nah, it's
about, but
true. It's true.
someone's
I
got to teach it.
That's exactly right. Someone definitely has to teach it. I can teach it without being a fan of the game, and I'm not a fan. It's just not my thing. Horror. Well, it's like you said in the beginning. You're not a horror fan person, which is also true for me for the most part. I have my moments where I kind of want to play it, particularly at night with the lights off. That's the best way to do it. Not necessarily Five Nights at Freddy. I think the last one I did that was like that was the Mortuary Assistant. Um, but
Yeah, I feel that they're a lot more fun to play with other people
yeah, very true.
than playing solo, and like I haven't done that since Outlast on the Xbox.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well, my wife likes to watch when I get the shit scared out of me, so that's fun for her.
I can imagine.
But Five Nights at Freddy's it's going strong. Cawthon is still has his hand on the wheel. He's not his hand on the wheel, foot on the gas, and he is not letting up anytime soon. You know. So well, we have kind of covered the Five Nights at Freddy's series. There's a lot of games in it. We're not going to cover each one. What you basically need to know is at a moment when this man lost his faith and hit rock bottom, he decided he was going to show his critics, if you think my last game was scary, just wait, I can make something scarier. And he did. And it was at the right time, at the right place. And because of that, it is very, very popular. Still 10 years later, going strong. So, but there are other games we talked about, like in the beginning, we talked about Metroid and Zelda no Densetsu. Lots of other games that we've covered in other episodes. Lots of video game history in and out of this one. If you want to take a look at any of those other episodes and check out some other history, you can, of course, do so by going to our website at www.memorycardlane.com. Rob, what else can people find on our website?
You can find a calendar of our future episode topics. You can find a link to our Discord. You can find a link to our Patreon. And you can find a link to our social medias, where I am on several platforms as Rob_O_Raptor. And Dave?
I can be found on various platforms as David is Wrong. Each week, we'll tell you a story relevant to the current week in gaming history. This week, we've celebrated the 10th anniversary of Five Nights at Freddy's and looked at the career of its creator, Scott Cawthon, as part of its story. Every week, we sit down with a new topic and do research. And when I sit down to research each topic, I try to pull out things that you may not know. Uh, I find things that I may not know, and in turn you may not know, and that's my favorite thing is being able to take all these fun new things, the kind of things that you don't need to know, the kind of things that maybe when you're playing trivia night at the local brew pub, might be good to know. But I get to take all these weird things that you may not know and teach them to you, and that is my favorite thing to do. It's a beautiful cycle of learning and teaching and learning and teaching. And in celebration of that cycle, every week we go roundtable and we talk about what we have learned. So, Rob, what did you learn today?
Well, I learned a whole lot about Five Nights at Freddy's that I had no idea about. Didn't know there were so many games or a movie. I'm blown away by that. But I think that the craziest part of all of it is that it was created by a dude who just kind of lost his faith in Christianity, and then created this horror game that was just the farthest you could get from that. Well, I guess I shouldn't say the farthest you could get. It could have been like Slenderman or something, but
True. Well, and he never lost his Christianity. That's important. So I went into this with that. I kind of knew the story, heard the story before. Kind of went into this going, okay, he lost his Christianity, he made it, but he never lost his Christianity. He got to the bottom of his faith, and he had thought that God had forsaken him, and then he felt God's guiding hand enticing him to make something. And he's kind of of the stance nowadays that you can be a Christian and make work that's not necessarily Christian in nature, but it doesn't have to be totally against your values. Like, these aren't gory games, they're not gory games, they're not graphical games and language, things like that. So that's kind of how he justifies it nowadays, is that God led him to make God led him to make these games, and he can make it and still live his Christian lifestyle, which he does, and I respect that.
no,
So
that's very fair. So, um, but it's still it's crazy just that he got so bad that he just went away from what he had started on and creating those Christian faith based games and created this. But that's, sometimes you just got to hit a low before you can hit the high.
very true.
So that's it for me. How about yourself?
I had an opportunity to sit down and play some of his early stuff. Like Desolate Hope, for instance, is available on Steam at no cost.
Did you play Fart
And
Hotel?
I did not play Far Hotel.
Ah,
No.
boo.
It's really interesting to see. Like, Desolate Hope is honestly, it's a good game, and it's really neat to see his art style outside of, like, his art style and his design outside of the Five Nights at Freddy's series, if that makes sense. And I'm not against the Five Nights at Freddy's series. It's working for him. People love it. Man, go do your thing. But just to see, like, the early semblances of what would become of it, and how he can take that same type of knowledge and graphical design and channel it into something else. Because Desolate Hope is like a cyberpunk type deal, was really cool to sit down and see. So I really enjoyed going through his early catalog, which I didn't know much about and never really paid attention to before. So that was my favorite thing, and I would encourage you to do the same. There are tidbits of his early games in places like, there's actually a Scott Cawthon wiki, um, a Scott's Games wiki, I think, is another one. There's places that you can find it, and again, some of it's on Steam, like Desolate Hope. I think If Moon somewhere too. So I would encourage you all to do that. Yep. And that's Five Nights at Freddy's. We did it, Rob.
That we did.
Before I take it out of here, would you like to add anything to today's episode?
As always, I want to take one moment to thank you all for listening. We hope that you're moving around, not spending too much time getting caught up in the murderous ways of life, and you just get to take a moment, sit back, relax, and learn about some of your favorite games with Rob and Dave.
The murderous way of life.
Hey,
That is really, really funny. Really, really funny. All right. Well, that's all the time we have for today. We hope that you enjoyed our deep dive into the world of Five Nights at Freddy's and learning all about the fascinating story behind its creation, which is really the story of a Christian game designer leaning into his criticism of his earlier games to successfully make something completely new. Next week, though, we're leaving the pizzeria behind to dive into the dark and atmospheric world of System Shock 2. Released in 1999, this game blended the first person shooter gameplay with role playing elements, creating an experience that has influenced countless titles in the survival horror and immersive simulation genres. So join us as we explore the development of System Shock 2, its impact on the gaming industry, and why, honestly, it's still considered a classic to this day. So get ready to hack into cyberspace and confront malevolent AI on next week's trip down memory card lane. Do the thing.
Do ba ba da ba da 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 do